In 2006, a team of researchers pulled DNA from every wildcat species on Earth, all 37 of them, from the Siberian tiger to the black-footed cat of the Kalahari, from the snow leopard perched on Himalayan ridges to the flat-headed cat lurking in the rivers of Borneo. Every living cat species, sampled and sequenced. Then they sat down and compared it all. The paper appeared in Science that year, led by geneticist Warren Johnson. And when other researchers read what the data revealed, the first reaction for a lot of them was flat-out disbelief, because the family tree that emerged from the DNA looked nothing like what anyone had assumed. Before that study, cats had mostly been grouped by appearance. Big cats together, medium cats together, small cats together, lion, tiger, leopard, jaguar, all enormous and roaring, clearly one group. The cheetah had spots like a leopard and lived in Africa like a lion, so it got filed near the big cats. The clouded leopard also had spots in decent size, so most classifications parked it somewhere between the small cats and the big cats. That physical resemblance approach held up reasonably well for a century. Then the DNA arrived and dismantled it. The researchers weren't just building family trees out of curiosity. They wanted to understand something specific. How did 37 cat species, spread across nearly every continent, actually relate to one another? Who descended from what, and when? To answer that, they used what's called a molecular clock. The premise is fairly simple. DNA mutates at a roughly predictable rate over time, so counting the genetic differences between two species lets you estimate how long ago they last shared a common ancestor. It's not a perfect tool, but it's vastly more reliable than eyeballing an animal's face and guessing. And what they found is that all 37 living cat species fall into one of 8 distinct lineages, 8 branches on the tree, each tracing back to its own separate common ancestor. And those branches don't land where anyone expected. Take the cheetah. It's one of the most recognizable animals on the planet. It lives in Africa alongside lions and leopards. It has spots like a leopard. It hunts by running down prey across open grassland. The same terrain lions work on the Serengeti. For a long time, it got classified near the big cats, and some researchers even suspected a close relationship to the leopard specifically, given the similar coat pattern. The DNA said no. The cheetah actually sits inside the puma lineage. Its closest living relatives are the cougar, the mountain lion of North and South America, and the jaguarundi, a small otter-faced cat found in the scrublands of Central America. The cheetah isn't a big cat, and never was. The spots, the African habitat, the open country hunting style, none of it reflects shared ancestry with lions or leopards. It reflects an entirely separate evolutionary path that just happened to land on similar-looking results. There's a term in biology for that, convergent evolution, when two unrelated species independently evolve the same trait because they're solving the same problem. The cheetah and the leopard both evolved spots, but they did it separately, millions of years apart, on completely different branches of the tree. The cheetah and the lion both became African predators, but their lineages had already split apart millions of years before either one ever reached Africa. The cheetah's speed, unmatched anywhere else in the cat family, evolved inside the puma lineage, not from any big cat ancestor. Which raises an obvious question. Why did this particular branch of the family produce the fastest land animal alive? The genetic data can't fully answer that, but it does confirm the cheetah's speed has nothing to do with a lion's strength or a leopard's agility. Those traits came from entirely different branches of the tree. Then there's the clouded leopard. Before the 2006 study, it occupied a strange middle ground in cat taxonomy. Too large for the small cats, too different from the true big cats. It has the largest canine teeth relative to skull size of any living cat, a trait that superficially linked it to the ancient saber-toothed cats. Most researchers just parked it in a category of its own, somewhere between the big cat lineage and everything else. The DNA confirmed the clouded leopard really is ancient. Its lineage split off from the rest of the cat family roughly 6 to 8 million years ago, making it the oldest surviving branch among all living cats. In genetic terms, a clouded leopard in Borneo is more distantly related to a Siberian tiger than that tiger is to a house cat. The clouded leopard has been running its own independent evolutionary track longer than almost any other cat on Earth. Then, in 2007, a year after the Johnson study, came a second bombshell. Researchers analyzing museum specimens and DNA from clouded leopards across Southeast Asia found that the populations on Borneo and Sumatra were genetically distinct enough from mainland clouded leopards to count as an entirely separate species, the Sunda clouded leopard. A brand new cat species, hiding in plain sight on islands people had been visiting for centuries, simply because no one had ever compared. The DNA carefully enough to notice. One genetic study revealed the cheetah had been misclassified. A follow-up study uncovered an entire species nobody had formally recognized. And the DNA was only getting started. Here's where things get stranger still. The Johnson study didn't just map who was related to whom, it mapped when and where each lineage first appeared. The molecular clock showed that all 37 living cat species descend from a single common ancestor that lived somewhere in Asia, roughly 10 to 15 million years ago. Asia, not Africa. Africa is where most people instinctively picture cats. The Serengeti, the lions, the leopards, the cheetahs. But the entire cat family actually originates in Asia. The common ancestor of every living cat, from the house cat to the tiger to the sand cat to the margay in the Amazon, lived somewhere in Central or East Asia, long before the African savanna held anything like the cat species it holds today. From that Asian starting point, cats spread outward in successive waves, different lineages moving in different directions at different times. The ancestor of the big cats, lions, tigers, leopards, jaguars, crossed into Africa and Europe around 6 to 7 million years ago. The ancestors of the ocelot group crossed from Asia into North America via the land bridge that once connected Siberia and Alaska, then pushed south into Central and South America. The domestic cat lineage stayed closest to its original range, spreading through the Middle East and North Africa. The Americas had no cats at all until roughly 8 million years ago. The entire Western Hemisphere was cat-free. Then the first wave crossed that land bridge from Asia, and every cat found in the Americas today descends from that single migration. Jaguar, ocelot, margay, puma, jaguarundi, bobcat, Canada lynx, all traceable back to one group of animals that crossed a land connection that no longer even exists. Some of the most striking findings from this genetic work weren't about family trees at all. They were about what had happened to specific species over time. Cheetah genetics turned out to be almost uniquely troubled. When researchers sequenced DNA from cheetahs across different populations, they found almost no variation between individuals. Cheetahs from East Africa, cheetahs from Southern Africa, and the small remaining population in Iran are genetically nearly identical. The variation you'd normally expect within a species is almost entirely missing. The explanation is a population collapse. Somewhere around 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, cheetah numbers crashed down to an extremely small founding group. And every cheetah alive today descends from that tiny population. In the millennia since, the species has never recovered the genetic diversity it lost. The practical consequences are real and genuinely strange. Cheetahs can accept skin grafts from completely unrelated individuals without rejection, something that would normally require an extremely close genetic match. Their immune systems respond identically to the same pathogens, which means a virus capable of killing. One cheetah can sweep through an entire population with almost no natural resistance to slow it down, because there's essentially no genetic variation left to provide it. What caused the original collapse? The DNA can tell us that it happened, and roughly when. It can't tell us exactly why. The leading explanation is the mass extinction event that ended the last ice age, the same one that wiped out the woolly mammoth, the giant ground sloth, and the cave lion. The cheetah survived it, but only barely, and that genetic scar never healed. The puma tells a similar story with an unexpected twist. Pumas, also called mountain lions or cougars, once ranged across both North and South America. Genetic data from modern pumas shows North America's population went through its own collapse, also around 10,000 years ago. But here's the surprising part. The pumas, living in Yellowstone, the Rockies, and the Florida Everglades today, aren't descended from the pumas that lived in North America before the Ice Age. That original North American puma population went extinct alongside the mammoths, ancient horses, and American camels. The pumas living there now descend from South American pumas that migrated back north after the original population died out. Within a few thousand years, South American pumas had reclaimed the entire continent. North America lost its pumas, then got them back from the south, and almost nobody knew it until the DNA showed up. The same broad pattern holds for other species, once you look closely enough. African lions, for example, show surprisingly low genetic diversity across their entire range. Genetic surveys spanning West Africa to South Africa show lions are far more genetically similar to one another than the geographic distances involved would suggest, pointing to a relatively recent population bottleneck. Lions may have come close to extinction more than once over the past 100,000 years, with a small founding group later re-expanding across the continent as conditions improved. The lions alive today aren't some ancient, stable population. They're the survivors of collapses the fossil record doesn't fully capture, preserved only in the DNA. Now for the cat that surprises people most when they learn where it actually sits on the tree, your house cat. Most people assume the domestic cat is essentially a scaled-down big cat, closely related to the leopard or lion or some other large African predator. The DNA places it instead in a lineage full of animals most people have never even heard of. The sand cat, which lives across the Sahara and the deserts of the Middle East, surviving on sidewinder snakes and heat that would kill most mammals. The jungle cat, a medium-sized spotted cat found across South Asia. The black-footed cat of southern Africa, and one of the smallest wildcats on Earth at roughly 1.5 kilograms, and also one of the most effective hunters by success rate, catching prey on more than 60% of its attempts, a rate no big cat comes anywhere close to. And the Chinese mountain cat, barely studied and barely photographed, living in near total obscurity on the Tibetan plateau. These are the closest living wild relatives of the animal asleep on your couch. Your house cat actually shares more recent common ancestry with a sand cat in the Sahara than with a leopard in South Africa. The leopard isn't even in the same lineage. Its branch split from the domestic cat's branch somewhere between 6 and 8 million years ago. For perspective, modern humans and chimpanzees shared a common ancestor roughly 6 million years ago. The domestic cat and the leopard have been on separate evolutionary paths for about that same span of time. The big cat group had its own set of surprises waiting too. Before genetic studies came along, the assumed relationships among big cats went roughly like this. Lion and tiger are most closely related, leopard somewhere in between, jaguar and snow leopard treated as the outliers. That reasoning was part geography, part appearance. Oh, lions and tigers are both large and lack spots as adults, while leopards and jaguars both carry rosette markings. The snow leopard was different enough from the rest that for decades it was placed in its own separate genus, apart from the true big cats. The DNA reclassified it. The snow leopard actually does belong within the big cat group after all, and its closest relative turns out to be the tiger, not the leopard, despite sharing its name. Two animals that look almost nothing alike. One built for high altitude and extreme cold, the other the largest cat in the world. Turn out to be closer genetic relatives than the snow leopard and the actual leopard. Two cats whose shared name implied a connection that genetically turned out to be pure coincidence. The jaguar's position shifted too. Jaguars and lions turn out to be more closely related to each other than either is to the leopard, a genuinely counterintuitive result, given that lions and jaguars live on entirely different continents and look quite different from one another. But DNA doesn't care about continents or appearances, it just records what actually happened. There's one more finding from this research that tends to stick with people. When researchers mapped the geographic history of the cat family using the molecular clock, they found that cats diversified remarkably fast. The entire spread of the family, all 37 species, across nearly every continent, adapted to deserts, rainforests, Arctic tundra, mountain glaciers, and coastal wetlands, happened within a geologically brief window. From the common Asian ancestor roughly 10 to 15 million years ago to the full range of species alive today took only a few million years, which is genuinely quick by evolutionary standards. This rapid diversification lined up with the global expansion of grasslands during a period of major climate change. As dense forests across Africa, Asia, and the Americas gave way to open grassland, new hunting territory opened up, and cats, already equipped with a highly effective basic hunting toolkit, expanded into that territory faster than almost any other mammalian predator family managed. What this really means is that the genetic differences between cat species are, in some ways, remarkably thin. A house cat and a tiger share the overwhelming majority of their DNA. The basic template, retractable claws, forward-facing eyes for depth perception, specialized teeth, strong hunting instincts, is essentially shared across all 37 species. What the molecular clock reveals is that in just a few million years, that single template produced animals ranging from 1.5 kilograms to over 300, living in every climate on Earth, independently evolving spots, stripes, solid coats, tufted ears, flattened heads, and webbed toes, all starting from the same basic blueprint. The cat body plan is one of the most successful designs in the history of vertebrate life, and the genetic data makes clear why. The underlying template is exceptionally good, and nature found 37 different ways to run with it. Warren Johnson's paper genuinely changed what biologists thought they knew about cats. Several long-standing findings had to be revised. Several species got reclassified. Several assumed relationships were quietly abandoned. The Sunda clouded leopard was discovered, in part, because this study created a proper framework for comparison in the first place. Snow leopards finally got moved into the big cat group where they belonged. The cheetah was firmly relocated into the puma lineage. But the finding that seems to linger longest, the one that took the most time for people to fully absorb, is about geography. Cats came from Asia. They spread outward in waves over millions of years, crossing land bridges that no longer exist today, reaching continents that were later colonized, then abandoned, then recolonized as climates shifted and sea levels rose and fell. The Americas had no cats until 8 million years ago, then went on to host more cat species than Africa does. Africa, which most people picture as the true center of cat diversity, was actually colonized by cats, arriving from Asia relatively late in the story. In the entire family, every tiger in Siberia, every jaguar in the Amazon, every lion on the Serengeti, every sand cat in the Sahara, every cat currently watching you from across the room, traces back to a single ancestor in Asia, living in a world that looked almost nothing like the one these animals inhabit today. The results genuinely shocked researchers who'd spent entire careers studying cats professionally, people who assumed they already understood the basic outline of the family, until a single genetic comparison reordered the whole picture. What DNA keeps showing, study after study, is that appearance is a poor guide to actual ancestry. The cheetah looks like a big cat and isn't one. The snow leopard carries the name leopard and isn't really one. The jaguar and the lion turn out to be closer to each other than either is to the leopard. The clouded leopard turned out to be two separate species. The house cat's closest wild relative lives out in the Sahara Desert. The family tree that emerges from the actual genetics is stranger and far more interesting than the one scientists had before. And the cat sitting on your windowsill, carrying a genome that's remained remarkably stable for thousands of years, is a far stranger animal than it looks. It isn't a miniature lion. It isn't a scaled-down leopard. It belongs to a completely separate branch of the family tree, alongside desert cats, jungle cats, and a tiny spotted hunter on the African plains that catches prey more reliably than any big cat alive. The animal watching you from across the room isn't some domesticated predator riding on a big cat's coattails. It's a member of a lineage that made its own choices, spread across the world on its own timeline, and has been doing things entirely its own way since long before anyone thought to compare the DNA.